Hello and welcome back to Prompt Circle, where we discuss AI business use cases and tutorials on how they can be implemented. In today's tutorial, we're going to be looking at how to analyze customer feedback, especially from responses that include free-form text. This is a common use case for most businesses, and I'll be showing you how to build it pretty quickly and easily. Let's take a look at it in action. All right, so what we have here is a typical Google Forms survey. And here we just have a simple customer satisfaction survey where we're going to be taking information about a customer's experience using a particular product. So we're going to ask them, what product they did purchase. In this case, I'm just going to choose product A. And on a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate your overall satisfaction with our product? I'm just going to choose 4. And on a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate our customer service? I'm going to choose 3. Now, this is really where the treasure trove of information typically lies for most businesses. When you are asking for free form text, this is where you obtain very important information that you can't necessarily predetermine. It's really hits at the heart of the person's true experience. So someone might have a truly remarkable experience, but there was one particular thing that probably wasn't that great, or something that was really wowing that you want to keep track of. So we're just going to go ahead and actually enter something in here, like, okay, I'm going to say the product experience was mostly okay. However, I did find some errors in the documentation, but and also would say that the customer service response time can be better, as I had to wait a few hours to get a reply. So let's go with this. So once we submit this, what's happening here is that we're going to receive in real time, we're going to receive a message doing a very quick analysis of this particular survey response. As you can see here, we just received a Slack message. So it's just kind of talking about, what the analysis of this particular free form text. The sentiment was neutral. It also provided some tags around product experience, documentation, errors, and customer service response. And the key takeaway here, it says that customer experienced some issues with documentation and customer service response time. And then it also mentions that, from an action item perspective, needs to review and correct documentation errors, implement measures to improve customer service response times. So in real time, we're receiving the information about that particular comment. Here someone can pick up on it and take action. In addition to that as well, one of the things we're doing is also providing that response right here inside inside Google Sheets. So typically you have your responses in Google Sheet, but what we've done is also add a few more columns where we are taking all of that analysis and attaching it in the spreadsheet, which is going to make it much easier for analysis. So for instance, you can then filter on sentiment, on tags. You can also see the key takeaways and action items also highlighted in here. So this very, very quickly makes it much easier for you to get salient, important information that you can act upon from a customer success point of view, or even from a product point of view. This can be a really useful tool that you can use to get more and extract more from your surveys. All right, so let's take a look at how we can actually build this. All right, so to build this, we're going to be using Slack as our notification platform. So we need to create a Slack incoming webhook URL, which I'm going to show you very, very shortly. You would need your OpenAI API key. You can use other large language models, but we're going to be using OpenAI's GPT-4 for this specific project. And we're going to also be using AppScript from the response sheet in Google Sheets. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing. So let's jump in and create our Slack incoming webhook URL. All right, so inside your Slack application, any of your Slack application, all you need to do is to go into the incoming webhook section, and all you really need to do when you go there is to add a new webhook to your workspace. This is going to give you the ability to authorize a specific channel where you want to send information in. In our case, we've created a channel called CSAT survey results. You can create your own channel and add as needed. And once we do that and click on allow, this creates a webhook URL, which you can then copy. Keep it in a safe place because that webhook URL just allows us to simply send messages directly into that channel. This is just for simplicity's sake. You can also implement a more robust solution if you prefer, but I thought this would be really simple to get us going. All right, so let's jump in and see how to create our AppScript function. All right, so in the response section of your Google Forms survey, you would be able to access your response Google Sheets. So all you need to do is just click on View and Sheets, and this would open up the Google Sheets that is responsible for holding your responses. Now, in our scenario, in our case, we've actually made some modifications here. For instance, I have made the headers bold. I've also added 4 more columns here, which is where we're going to be storing some of our information. So all we really need to do to access the AppScript is to go to extensions and click on AppScript. And all right, so this is going to show us the code that is actually powering this. So I'm going to show you exactly how this works and how you can set it up. Now, first things first, the first thing you need to do is to set up your OpenAI API key and then the Slack webhook URL, which we just created. You want to store them in your script properties. So if you go into your project settings and go all the way to the bottom of it, you would see your OpenAI API, you would see the script properties. Inside script properties, all you really need to do is to add your 2 script properties. In my case, I've added OpenAI API key, and I've also added the Slack webhook URL. Now, once you do that, as you can see here, I am declaring the 2 properties in here. And to declare properties, basically all you need to do is to go to properties service dot get script properties, which is a function, and inside that function you're going to call get property OpenAI API key for our OpenAI API key, and we're doing the same thing for our Slack webhook URL. So now I'm going to go walk through the entire function that we actually use when we are analyzing the free-form text inside our form responses. Now, but before we do that, to actually work with this, we need to set up a trigger, because basically our form or our function actually runs only when the submit button is clicked. So the moment the submit button is clicked, this function gets triggered. To actually make sure that this trigger works, you need to go into your trigger section and set up a trigger. Now, my trigger basically is set up to simply trigger on form submit. So you go into your trigger to triggers and create a new trigger, and in there you want to select on form submit, and also you want to select the event source from the spreadsheet and the event type on form submit. And that's basically all you really need to do to have a trigger set up. So let's go back into the code now. So basically our function is on form submit e, which basically is a listener that is listening for a specific trigger. Now, what we're doing here is that we are going to be setting the values and our range inside this response, inside as basically. So basically the event, the onSubmit event, will contain values and a range. Inside there, we're going to find timestamp, email, product type, overall rating, customer service rating, and then feedback finally. So these are going to be the values that we're going to be using here. So now once we actually set all of this up, we want to set up a prompt that we're going to be using in GPT-4 to pull to analyze that text. So as you can see here, for instance, we've crafted this prompt and I'm saying analyze the following customer feedback, return the analysis as a JSON object, including let's see here, including the following. So we have sentiment and we're saying that's what we want to return, and I'm giving it the options. We said return some tags, and then we have a key takeaways here as well. Now we have also action items, which we have added here as well. So basically I want to explain this prompt because this prompt is pretty powerful, even though it's pretty simple. So what I've done here is, one, I wanted to return my information in a JSON object. And the reason I do that is because I want it to be predictable. With large language models, you can't always say exactly how the response is going to be provided to you. So whenever you're writing a prompt, you can define how you want the response returned and provide an example of what you are looking for. So in my case here, I am looking for a JSON object that contains these values. And then finally, I also want to pass the feedback specifically which I wanted to analyze. So basically here I'm just doing a simple conditional. If there is a feedback, I want to essentially call my GPT analyze feedback function and also pass in my prompt. So we're going to look at that function in a second. But basically what we're doing here is, like, once we get the JSON, once we get our feedback, we're going to pass it over into our call GPT analyze feedback, because this is what's going to do the analysis. Now, once we do the analysis, what we're going to return back is going to be a JSON. So remember, we said we want to return our response in JSON. So once we return the response in JSON, then we're going to go ahead and actually parse that response. So we want to extract the values from each attribute. So that's basically what we're going to do next. Now, once we're done with that, we're going to go ahead and send that information that has been parsed to Slack as a notification. So using our Slack webhook URL, we're going to send that information to Slack. Finally, we're going to also update the Google Sheet with the tags and categories and all of the information we returned from OpenAI as well. So that's basically what our main function is going to be doing. That's what the main handler is going to be doing. So let's look at the individual functions that are actually going to be powering these. So starting with what we're doing when we analyze the feedback from using OpenAI. So we have a function here called call GPT analyze feedback, which takes in a prompt as a variable. And remember what we did with our prompt. With our prompt, we provided some instructions and we also passed in the feedback that we wanted to analyze. So here we're using the OpenAI chat completions because we're using GPT-4, but we're using the chat completions endpoint. We're setting that as our URL and we're creating a payload that we want to pass as a call to these API endpoint. Now, typically when you're working with GPT-4, you're going to be passing a set of messages which include messages for different roles. So the first role here is a system role. Typically in this system role, you're just basically defining how you want your chatbot to perform. So here we're saying you're a helpful assistant, you help provide analysis on survey responses, and then you provide the analysis via Slack message, and we're saying it should be concise and focus on key itemized bullet points. So I'm just saying this is exactly what I'm expecting. Now the second bit is the user. So this is the actual prompt that we're passing in as the user, and that's what we're retrieving from our earlier function, which when we created our prompt up here. So once we pass that in, then we need to pass in our parameters, so which include what is the type of call we're making. So the method here is post, and we're passing in a header which includes the content type along with our authorization, which basically is a bearer token which contains our OpenAI API key. And finally, we're passing the payload which we constructed earlier on here. So once again, we're just going to use the URL fetch app function, which allows us to basically make an API call directly from AppScript. So that's what you use when you're using AppScript. And then we basically store the response inside a JSON response. Now, to access the actual response from OpenAI, you need to go into choices and choose the very first item in that list of choices, and then we're going to look at message.content. Here we're doing some trimming to make sure that we're returning the right format, and we're also implementing some error handling here to make sure that if there is any error, we're able to capture it. Now, the next thing we want to do is that we're creating our function that actually sends the message to Slack once we get our analysis. And basically what we're sending to Slack is the analysis object and an email as well. So the email that is coming in from the responder. So here we're now taking all of the responses that we're expecting. We're expecting a sentiment. So we're going to basically obtain the value of the sentiment from our object. We're also expecting tags, and we're going to be separating them with commas. We're also expecting takeaways as well as action items. So what we're going to do, remember, our incoming webhook URL from Slack basically allows us to simply make an API call that sends a message directly into that channel. So we're going to construct the payload here. Our payload is going to contain information, our text. So if you remember the way the Slack message appeared before, so we're just constructing what we expect it to look like. So we're putting in text information as the header. We're putting like this is from this particular email. We're adding some analysis in here, including our dynamic values as well. And then finally, we're making a post call to that URL. So again, we're using URL fetch app, and we're making a post call to the Slack webhook URL. And once again, we're doing some error handling here, and that's basically it. Now, finally, the last function that we have here, and I'm just going to reduce the size here so we can see this more clearly. All right, so the last function that we got here, if you can see this a little bit clearly, is a function that basically updates the sheet, the Google Sheet, with additional information. So basically, we want to get the range of our current sheet, and we want to also pass in the analysis object. That way, we can just basically look for the very, very last row. So in our case is the G row. So this is G. So that's basically what comes after our own question responses. So we're looking at G. So we're saying for GHIJ, we're going to set values for sentiment, for tags, key takeaways, and action items. So that's it. Very, very easily, we've written 3 functions, combined them together to respond to the onSubmit action. And that's exactly how you can have this. I'm going to put this also in GitHub and make it available to you if you want to use that in building your own version of it as well. I find that this is a very, very quick and easy way to actually use this application. So Let me know what you build. Let me know if you have any questions as you build along. And also, if you're interested in learning more about building large language model applications from scratch, from start to finish, if you're learning and you understand a little bit of Python, I do have an amazing course that takes you from the beginning all the way to deploying into production. I'll put a link in the description if you are interested. I'm very, very curious to see what you build and how you use this to analyze form data. So if there are ideas that you have in mind that you're going to try out, I'd love to hear about them. If you love this type of content, please make sure to subscribe, share, and turn on the notifications as well so that you can hear from us to see our tutorials. We do release tutorials quite frequently on how to build large language model driven applications, especially, as well as other AI driven applications as well. Thank you, and talk to you next time.